OK, that's our correspondent David Stern. 16 minutes now past 10. A third of people under 45 say they have no realistic prospect of owning their own home. The average house price in the UK is now just over £250,000. That's 45 times higher than it was in 1971, when you could get a house for £5,000. The survey from the Halifax also says that 1 in 5 young people now have no desire to buy a house or a flat. So are we falling out of love of the idea of owning our own home, or is it just that the house prices are too high? Maybe you're hoping to buy, maybe you prefer to rent. You can pick up the phone to us tonight. You know the score: 0500 909 693. 0500 909 693. Right, who shall we talk to? Let's talk to Jonathan Davis first, the economist and wealth manager. Hello, Jonathan.
Hi, Stephen.
What do you think's going on here? So many people not wanting to own their own home. Is that down to affordability, or they just don't want the risk anymore?
Both. As you say, we've had nearly 50 years of a trend up in house prices, and in the last 10 or so years, it's almost entirely down to policymaker sort of government intervention. Gordon Brown started it 10 years ago big time by encouraging everyone to borrow as much as they possibly could and encouraging the banks to lend. And then George Osborne carried it on from last year when he brought out what I call the most inequitable and Marxist policy I've seen since Gordon Brown, in the name of Help to Buy. In 2010, 2011 and 2012, house prices were broadly flat, apart from, of course, in central London, and they were about to fall off a cliff, and they were about to have the writing, the sorting out that they needed, they desperately needed. As I say, Help to Buy came in, and that put a kibosh on that. At some point, there will be the sorting out that's required.
Well, you've said this for a long time, but the sorting out's happened, hasn't it? If you're talking about crashes and price falls, the sorting out has happened.
Yeah, no, you're of course normally based in Northern Ireland, and it certainly has there. And indeed in Scotland, Wales, north of England and the Midlands. But the national average, of course, is massively skewed by London and the South East. So house prices did right themselves, as I say, outside of London and the South East, but they didn't really in London and the South East, and that's where the real action is. As I say, until government gets out of the way, we're never going to get house prices the way they should be. But of course, at some point, it's not even going to be down to George Osborne or whoever is the Chancellor or the Governor of the Bank of England in maybe a couple or a few years' time. Because, you know, the national government or policymakers will do whatever it can to keep this joke going, because as everyone knows, it's a big vote winner. No, what will happen, there will be another global economic shock like 2008, and that's going to be the big one, I'll tell you. 2008 was the hors d'oeuvre. The next one, unfortunately, will be the main course, because, you know, the one thing they will not be able to do the next time we fall into recession, which, as I say, will not be internally created, they will not be able to slash interest rates, which, of course, is what they've done for 40 years, because we're nearly at zero. We're at 0.5% on the base rate, and no doubt the next time we have a recession...
Yeah, Jonathan, just reel back from some of the spin, all right? I know you feel passionately about this, but for a start, well, I'll tell you why it's spin, because you're saying the government won't be able to reduce interest rates. You know that the government don't control interest rates. It's the Bank of England. They've handed over control of interest rates to the Bank of England. That's why I know you're spinning.
You're the one who's spinning. Please do not tell me that the Bank of England is independent of the government. It's absolute utter nonsense. The Bank of England does the job that the government of the day wants it to do. But in any case, the base rate is 0.5%. No doubt when there's another recession, they will reduce it to zero. But I'm telling you, and I'm telling your listeners, in a recessionary environment, when businesses are going out of business, when people are losing their jobs, all they'll be able to do is reduce the base rate by 0.5%. And I can assure you, unfortunately, that will unleash depressionary circumstances, because a 0.5% fall in interest rates will not make the blindest bit of difference compared to 2009, when, of course, we just had the biggest economic financial collapse in history. They slashed the interest rate from 5% to 0.5%. They cannot do that ever again.
Denise Stringer, you're from Manhattan Estate Agents based in Manchester. What's your read of the property market at the moment? And you're hardly going to tell us, like Jonathan is telling us, that it's going to fall apart.
To be honest with you, on the sales have really, really picked up. But the rentals have been busy since, as Jonathan said, in 2008 when the market, everything crashed. And obviously nobody could sell anything and everybody was then decided to rent. The rentals are still carried on. We're in Chorlton in Manchester, is always been very, very buoyant. The sales are picking up now, but people are, I do find now that it is older people that are renting all the time, where before you'd get sort of your early 20s that'd be the ones that would rent, and then they'd sort of save the deposit and they'd go on to buy, where now what we're finding is, I'm finding it's sort of your 25 pluses that are renting. Other than that, before that, they all seem to be staying at home, and we're having people that perhaps might be in, like, say, a one-bedroom flat, and they can't afford a deposit or anything to buy something bigger. They've outgrown that. So what they're doing is they're renting the property out they've got, so that they're not coming off the housing market, off the ladder, and then they'll then rent that, go into rented accommodation.
Presumably, and Leslie Henderson with us as well tonight. 0500 909 693, by the way, if you want to pick up the phone, whether you're maybe you're a first-time buyer, trying to find your first home and the prices. You can let me know what you think of them. Leslie Henderson. Hello, Leslie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay, thank you. You're author of Landlords, The Survival Guide.
And of Tenants, The Survival Guide.
Ah.
I wrote the first ever Tenants Survival Guide.
I see.
12 years ago.
And why do you think so much, a third actually, of under 45s say they've no prospect of owning their own home?
I don't actually have a problem per se. I have to say I utterly agreed with the economist who you gave a bit of a hard time to. But
Jonathan's tough enough for it. I've known him a long time, Leslie.
He was right. My son's an economist. And
there you go, Jonathan. You'll be happy tonight. You've got a supporter.
I'm always happy, and I've got lots of supporters.
Yeah, me too. I don't think the problem is with people renting per se. They do it all over Europe and are perfectly happy, and there are no B&Qs. People don't spend their weekends painting the windows. What's the problem is the nature of the leases that they're offered. They're temporary contracts to go with a young person's temporary employment contract or their void hours contract or whatever other crap they're being offered. If a landlord or an agent thinks you're a trouble because you complain about the mould or the broken boiler or whatever, it is just too simple to sling a tenant with reasonable concerns out of the property. And that's what happens. So if tenancies were more civilised, indeed if tenancies were what the 1988 Housing Act set out to create, which was assured leases, people could take a rental and they could live in it and know that the rent would go up with inflation, etc., etc. They'd have obligations to pay their rent, look after the place, but they could have a life.
But surely the really interesting stat within this Halifax survey is that 1 in 5 young people, Leslie Henderson, have no desire to buy a house or a flat.
I'm not surprised. I'm really not surprised with you. I don't know how old you are, but I'm also a lot older.
I'm 40, Leslie.
Yeah, well, I had my
well
60th in Lanzarote, so I've seen 1 or 2 of these crashes before. But I'm not surprised because of the cost of housing. And as for George Osborne's scheme to keep everybody nice and happy before the next election, He's put that limit up there for the government to underwrite loans up to £600,000. This is not first-time buyer territory. This is more buy-to-let landlord territory.
Okay, here's Stephen in Leeds. Hello, Stephen.
Good evening, Stephen.
What are your thoughts, mate?
Well, I think I've been on your programme a few weeks ago. The housing bubble caused, or the collapse of the housing bubble caused economic depression in this country. I object to people from wealthy areas buying up homes in poor areas, thus depriving those people from those areas of getting onto the property ladder. Let me tell you, the majority of people that I know want to own their own homes. They want a secure future. But we are obsessed in this country by making money on a home. A home is to live in, not to make a quick buck. And I can just see what's going to happen. So many people cannot afford to even put down the deposit without the help from their parents or friends or relations or whoever. It is unfair, it is immoral, it is unethical. I worked for a property company a number of years ago. It was a fellow called Arnold.
Commercial markets aren't driven.
Commercial
markets, free markets, Stephen, aren't driven on ethics.
Stephen, you're missing the point here. You accuse me of not being a capitalist. I'm a capitalist, but you've got to have capitalism with limits. You can't let capitalism go unchecked, because if you do, you make a very, very unfair society.
Go on, Jonathan.
We have not had free markets in the housing industry for 30 years. The reason why house prices have risen 300%, 400%, 500% in that period is not because of the free market. If it was because of the free market, I tell you, the national average would not be 250,000. It would be 50 to 100,000. It's because of state intervention, time and time again.
I have to say, can I interrupt just here and say I absolutely agree. We don't have a free market in housing, and we didn't have a free market at any time either since the lengthy period of time Whitehall spent on designing assured leases. They were supposed to be just landlords and tenants, no agents involved, no extra fees involved. I sat in, well, not horror, but just shock when I realised that our rent roll had tripled in 18 months after 1992, because initially buy-to-let didn't really take off. It was still a very much of a minority thing. But tenants are young and they don't want this level of hassle. Girl on Question Time the other night stuck her hand up and very bravely said, the problem with being a tenant is even if you complain the place is black with mould, you know you'll get thrown out.
Denise?
I don't agree with that. I'm sorry. I am a letting agent. We do sales and we do lettings. I've got a lot of tenants. I manage about 400 to 500 properties. And I can, honest to God, my hand on my heart, say, I've got some tenants that have been in my properties. I've got one tenant, for example, been there 12 years, another one 10 years. I've got a lot of tenants. And, you know, a lot of them stay a long, long time. The minimum tenant stay is, we always give a 6-month short hold, not just for the landlord, but for the tenant as well, because people's circumstances change. You don't want to tie them in to 12 months, etc., but 6 months and then go on a rolling contract. Most people stay a minimum of 18 months to 2 years.
One of the largest letting agents in this country told me the only reason that they gave out 6-month leases was because they could charge the tenant for a lease renewal fee. You might not. You do actually sound like one of the nicest people that I've heard who's running a letting agent.
Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
I've never had anything to do with them other than parties that I'm invited to, or I move and try and find someone sensible to talk to.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
I have oh, I can't tell you, it annoys me so much. I can't abide letting agents that I charge an administration fee. I charge £80, right, which we do all the references. One of my big bugbears is I can't abide agents that charge to when they're taking the tenant in, they're taking the tenant out, they charge you for this, they charge you for that.
Yep.
I can't abide it. I'll tell you now, I know somebody that if a tenant is locked out, they charge them £35 to go and open the door.
Yes, I know.
It infuriates me.
I have, yeah, I mean, these are the things when...
And these are people that give us a bad name.
It's very much like the £300 for the lease.
It's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
I buy leases from Oye, and they cost me £2 each or £1.50 if I buy them
right,
by
well, what I
phone.
do is, and this, you can ask any of my tenants or you can ask anybody, it's £80 each administration fee.
Listen,
Once
no
you
harm
pay
to
that,
listen.
that is it.
Yeah, listen, no harm to you two, but you're talking a wee bit,
We are,
in
you're
house
right.
here.
Sorry, yeah.
That's all right.
Apologies.
That's
Apologies.
Sorry, it's just
You're
a thing
quite
about-
right. I don't blame anybody who thinks that
See-
renting is more secure than buying.
And if you think about other European countries, Jonathan Davis, Denise and Leslie, in the world, I'm thinking of the likes of Germany and elsewhere.
All rent.
They haven't got this mindset that they have status, that they've got to own their own home. It's just never been the case.
I'm sorry.
In fact, some of those countries would feel it's crazy to take on the responsibility and the debt associated with the house, Jonathan.
Stephen, it's a myth. Just funnily enough, just this week, I sent out an email to our clients, our wealth management clients, and included in that was a chart of owner occupation and rentals across the EU. In that chart, there were 24 countries, 28 countries, beg your pardon, and 24 of them have higher owner occupations than the UK. The point is, wherever there is a housing bubble, there will be a mania in property. Germany absolutely is the developed country, the first world country that stands apart, that has a high rental, absolutely. But generally across the EU, and I wish the BBC would not keep on trotting out this myth, which is nonsense, across the EU, actually most countries have a higher owner occupation than the UK because everywhere practically has had a housing bubble.
I don't know. I spend quite a bit
It's
of
a
time...
fact.
Well, that might be a fact, but if you're comparing Romania with France, then you're going to find a higher home ownership level because, quite honestly, it's not that expensive to put up a farm cottage on some rough land with no consents. What you're talking here about, what I'm talking here about, are the more long-standing countries in Europe, the countries that you and I would recognise and probably go on holiday to. Most people would, and most people there do rent.
Not true. That's absolute
that
rubbish. I'm sorry, it's rubbish. I've got the facts. I sent it out to hundreds of people last week. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, but you might well have been.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just saying that it isn't. If I could banish one single expression in the English language, it would be get on the housing ladder.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Can I just say one
No,
thing?
we're done. We have to go to the news.